Story number 1. We were on lockdown. I will never forget the scary evening of December 12th, 2012. It was a night I would soon never forget. First, let's start you with some background. I'm currently 28 years old, but back when this happened, I was 22. I was studying at Cal State Fullerton in Southern California, and it was your average ordinary afternoon. Students were sitting around campus, talking with friends and studying for finals, and I found myself inside Mahalo Hall, a building where most of the business majors spend time at. Inside Mahalo Hall, there's a Starbucks, and that's where I was sitting at. There I was, drinking a coffee and reading one of my online textbooks. It was around 3:30 p.m. That's when I remember my friend Julia texting me.
Hey, if you're bored, there's a police chase going on TV if you want to watch it. Funny enough, it's not too far from campus. Are you still there?
I know it sounds cruel, but how many of you are guilty for watching police chases on live TV? Show of hands, be honest. Yep, that's what I thought. Well, I texted her back saying that indeed, I wasn't home, and that I was studying at school. Then I told her to provide me with some updates, just for curiosity. Well, little did I know this curiosity would soon come knocking quite literally 15 or so minutes later. So fast forward with those 15 minutes, I started to hear sirens. Not sirens from a fire alarm, mind you, but from the police. I tried not to pay attention to it as I really needed to get work done, but it became apparent that something was up when some of the students inside the Starbucks got up and started staring out the window. So I go ahead and look up, and sure enough, we can see 5 men running in all directions. One was caught by officers, and then one started running to our building. As for the other 3, they head across the street. As for the man running to Mahalo Hall, he enters, and it soon becomes apparent what was happening. The police chase my friend had mentioned had stopped just outside our campus. As for the culprits, you guessed it, they were here. But here's the thing, we honestly thought that he was going to start firing off shots, but he sort of just runs off heading further into the campus. Moments later, police storm Mahalo Hall, and they're saying, "Okay, everybody remain calm and stay where you are. Did anybody see a suspicious person run through here?" Students started pointing to the exit of Mahalo Hall, and about 10 cops go running after him. Now, before continuing on with what happens next, including what I had to go through, let me tell you about what started this mess. An hour earlier in the city of Moreno Valley, 5 men in ski masks stormed a pawn shop, and naturally, they took everything they could. Obviously, they were armed, which makes the whole situation that much more scarier. Well, the team eventually gets into a vehicle, and that leads them on a police chase. That's when almost an hour later, they found themselves on our campus. So, back to me. Well, after seeing this crazy event unfolding right before me, I was left in shock. But also, I was left with the realization I was going to be late for my class. So I put my laptop away and I throw my coffee out and I make my way to the 3rd story. Mind you, I'm still in the same building. And as I'm heading upstairs, officers are shouting, telling everybody to head to a room and to lock themselves in there. This was turning into a lockdown. And it became scarier when I hear students running into the building with panic, saying that the man that ran onto campus was armed. Well, I make it to my classroom, where myself and about 70 other students spend the next few hours waiting in suspense. The whole time, the campus is updating us with text messages, telling us every little detail. Things like,
Remain calm, keep all the doors closed, and don't open the door for anybody. Make sure to keep all the lights off, and put as much as you can between the door and yourselves.
Reading some of those text messages were the scariest things in my life. So, what did we do while we waited? Well, we all sat around on our phones, huddling together, and coming up with a plan if things went wrong. After a while, a SWAT team was able to get us out, and I left campus being welcomed by my mom and dad, who were crying tears of joy. Mind you, I was updating them with every little detail, and they were watching on the local TV, fearing the worst. Sadly, for some of the other students, they were on lockdown until almost midnight, as they couldn't find the suspect. The fear was that he had changed clothes and he had blended in with the students, but that wasn't the case. The man ended up getting away. So, yeah, a real-life scary ordeal that I hope no one ever has to go through. Like I mentioned, if you want more information, you can look up Cal State Fullerton 2012 lockdown, and it should be one of the first links you see. Anyways, that's my experience. Stay safe, friends. Story number 3. The Story of Anna. For some background context, I was 20 years old, and this was in 2011. I was your average ordinary college girl. I was on the track and field team. I would spend my afternoons training and running. When I wasn't studying or doing after-school activities, I would spend time on the computer, watching videos and listening to music. Well, one day, a friend of mine introduced me to anime. I had seen shows like Pokemon, but I never really knew more about it. Needless to say, I fell in love with anime, and I would spend hours just binge-watching different shows. After a couple of months, I even made a YouTube channel and started making friends with different other users. One user in particular stood out from the rest. I don't remember their username since this was over 7 years ago, and the channel no longer exists. They told me they were a girl. If I remember correctly, she said her name was Anna. Now, in case you're wondering what this has to do with school, I'm getting to that. Just give me a minute. Anyways, it started off with her responding to one of my comments that I made on an anime music video. One thing led to another, and we started talking pretty much every day. And it started off pretty innocently. Soon enough, we moved over to Skype, and we would text each other while I would do homework or when I was watching a show. One day, the question of how we looked like came up. I thought nothing of it, and I sent her a couple of selfies. And when I wanted to see what she looked like, she avoided the question. So I said, "Hey, do you want to do a video chat? It would be great to see your face." She avoids the question, saying she didn't have a webcam or that her camera was broken. That was the first sign that something was wrong. On another occasion, I wanted to know if we could do a phone call, but again, she came up with excuses, saying something had come up. I was starting to get even more curious, but she was still really nice to me, so I didn't really mind it. However, one day I ended up making the mistake of telling her where I lived. Why I did this? Maybe because I was naive? But I think it was just because we had grown so comfortable talking to one another that I really didn't think much more of it. Something else I told her was the school I went to. See where this is going? I remember her saying how she only lived a few hours away from me and she wanted to visit sometime. I jumped at that opportunity, but at the same time, something in my head was telling me otherwise. Why not just reveal who you are now? Well, she told me she wanted to surprise me and that it would be a meeting that we would talk about for the rest of our lives. One day, she messages me while I'm at school and she sends me some pictures. It's of this really beautiful girl. The pictures looked almost too perfect, almost as if they were taken from searching online. I called her out on it after I found the same pictures when I did some searching myself, and she apologized, but either way, I was starting to get more and more curious. Wouldn't you know it, she wanted to meet on a Saturday night on campus, and at midnight, she was going on to say I would finally be able to see who she truly was. Now, if that wasn't suspicious enough, I'm guessing this Anna person thought I was more naive than I already let on to be. Well, I ended up getting my friends involved, and we all became curious with who this Anna truly was, and if their intentions were as innocent as they claimed to be. We decided to come up with a plan. Let's meet this Anna, and let's see if they are who they claim to be. Fast forward to the evening of this so-called special meeting. The rumor of Anna started to spread, and soon what started off as an entourage of 5 people grew to over 15 of my closest friends. 5 of them were on the wrestling team, and I knew if things got serious, they would have no problem taking this person on. So, we chose a meeting spot, which was located in the park behind our school, and my friends ended up hiding close by. Now, mind you, this person could have been armed, and he could have easily taken us out one by one, but since our curiosity was at an all-time high, this was something we didn't really take into consideration. Well, as Anna and I are texting, my friends are whispering near some of the trees and shrubbery, and that's when we can see some vehicle headlights shine through the parking area. Soon enough, we can see this tall, white figure begin to make their way closer and closer. Anna was here. Now, when they walked next to a nearby park light, I can see more details. In front of me was not a 21-year-old named Anna. Instead, I was staring at this 40-something-year-old dude with glasses who was overweight with greasy hair and a ponytail.
Christine? Is that you? It's so good to see you.
I played it off cool instead of running because I wanted answers. I'm sorry, but who are you? You're not Anna, are you? Why did you want to meet up here like this? And why this late? He stands silent there for a couple of more seconds before finally he speaks up yet again.
I'm really sorry for leading you on. It's just that if I told you I was a girl, I was hoping you would talk to me.
I felt bad for him, but at the same time, I was mad that for almost a year, this person claimed to be someone they were not. I then start to walk away, but that's when he acts. The dude comes lunging at me, and he manages to tackle me to the ground. He then says something I would never forget.
I waited all this time, patiently, and now you're going to come with me whether you like it or not.
My wrestling friends see this and jump out of their hiding spots like a pack of wild hyenas. One look at the man's face showed he was beyond scared, and he takes off running to his van. Now it appeared he was with somebody else, because he just jumps into the passenger side, and the van takes off seconds later. Needless to say, the guy is able to get away. But if there was any good news, none of us were hurt. That was the last time I saw or heard from Anna. My best guess was he thought it was best not to ever get involved with me now that I knew what they looked like. So, that's the story and the legend of Anna. As a reminder, be careful with who you talk to online. They might not be who they claim to be. Also, I got away lucky, but not everybody else does. Story number 5. It all started on campus. This was back in the late 2000s. I was 18 years old. I'm female, by the way, and I was attending high school in Northern California. I just got in my first car, and I enjoyed going on mini road trips every weekend. It was a fun way to distract myself from studying. Now, even though having a car came with its perks, such as being able to go where I wanted, it also ended up getting me unwanted attention. One day after dance practice, so around 8 p.m., I was walking back to my car. I knew it was at the very back of the parking lot, so I figured I was going to take a couple of minutes. As I started to get closer, I could see a tall figure looking into the car, acting really suspiciously. Then out of the blue, they run off, and they jump over a nearby fence. Strange, but I walk up to my car and nothing seems out of the ordinary. Maybe it was just somebody that was admiring it. But then I looked to the windshield, and there was a note. I got scared thinking I'd received a parking ticket, but I knew I was allowed to park at this time. Well, I open it, and it's a message, and it was something like this.
Hey, I saw you a bit earlier at the Taco Bell. You're very pretty. Here's my number and my name. Call me sometime.
It was very strange. Yes, I did go to Taco Bell to get a couple of tacos after school, and then I went to my dance practice a few hours later. But the thing is, I don't remember anyone looking at me funny, let alone following me. I tried my best to retrace my steps, but I couldn't figure it out. So instead, I decided to call each one of my friends, thinking maybe this was some sort of prank. Each one of them told me that they hadn't been out at that time, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Really weird, but it was about to get even stranger a few days later. On a Friday afternoon, my friends and I were studying at some of the benches outside my school. That's when we noticed this old minivan with darkened out windows slowly roll up beside our table. At first, we ignored it, but after 10 minutes of no one stepping outside, we started to become uncomfortable. So we get up and we began walking away, but then all of a sudden, the minivan comes to life, and it's approaching us like a mountain lion after its prey. My friend Jonathan yells at the driver to knock it off, and the vehicle just leaves. That was the first encounter. Then, one night, I was out with my friend Madison, and we were walking my pet German Shepherd. As we started walking back to my house, however, we became aware of a strange man in a hoodie. He was keeping his distance, but we could tell he was going in the same direction, because any time we tried going in circles, he would keep up. Eventually, my friend and I decided to book it back to my house, and we don't see him. The thing is, as we look out the window, we can see him trying to get into my house. He gives up after I yell from the window saying I was going to call the police, and mind you, I never got a good description of him due to the hoodie. So once again, we fast forward to another few nights later, and my phone rings. It's from an unknown number. Okay. Well, I answer it thinking it was a random telemarketer, but instead, it was a complete stranger.
Why haven't you called me back yet? I've been keeping a close eye on you. You're not making this easy for me, are you? But that's okay. I'm enjoying every last moment. Besides, I know you're home alone. I've been watching.
I was confused. Who was this, and how did they get my number? How did this person know I was home alone? Then, something clicked. Could this be the same person in connection with the stalking? Also, are they related to the telephone number left in the note? Turns out my assumptions were true because he calls me by my first and last name and begins to tell me he had left a note on my car, hoping I would call him. Well, once again, I remind him he has to leave, otherwise I would be calling the police. This seems to excite him even more, but before the call ends, he says,
Well, you better hope they get in there before I get to you.
The phone then goes silent, but noise was about to be heard. I hear the distinct sound of a window downstairs smashing open. Then there are footsteps. No way. This man had broken in. But what to do? What to do? One thing was obvious. I had to act quickly, so instinctively I lock the door and start pushing a drawer in front of it while calling for help. As I'm on the phone describing my ordeal, he starts kicking at my bedroom door, demanding I let him in. I'm pretty much crying and all my adrenaline is pumping, and I'm not sure what's going to happen next. But then I get the idea of going out my window and running across the street, so that's what I ended up doing. I walk over to my window and I started to make my way out. Just before I reach the ground, I hear a crashing sound, and I later learn that he succeeded in getting in, but luckily for me, I was nowhere in sight. Now, with my neighbors, we wait for officers to arrive 10 minutes later. After another 5 minutes, they find him hiding underneath my bed with one of my kitchen knives from my kitchen. He turned out to be a guy in his early 50s who had been in trouble in the past with similar reports of stalking. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize he had bad intentions, but what exactly he wanted to do remains a mystery. Speaking of a mystery, I never found out how he got my name, but it wouldn't be surprising if he overheard it in secret before the stalking commenced. Story number 6. He broke into my dorm. It was the first day of my sophomore year of college, August 2018. Gone were the days of hanging out with my friends in the summer. Now, I had to focus on my career and really getting serious. However, in this mindset of being serious and getting down to studying, I had no idea in preparing myself for the creepy ordeal I would have to go through during my first semester. The first day and first class I was in was for an introduction to radio and TV film. The class consisted of the professor going over the syllabus and students introducing themselves to one another. That was the part I enjoyed the least. I was just here for myself. I really wasn't looking to have friends. But whatever, I guess it was what it was. So I turned to each side, and I go over some basic introductions with 2 of my fellow classmates. We exchanged phone numbers, and we even added each other on Snapchat. I was more into messaging on there, and they seemed friendly enough, so everything was cool. One of them tells me they'll add me a bit later since their phone was at 5% and they were trying to save the battery. Fair enough. A bit later that afternoon, I was in the library going over a syllabus, and that's when I noticed my phone's screen turn on. However, before I could see what the notification was about, my mom calls me saying she was on the way to pick me up. We talk for about 10 minutes as I now go over how my day went. Then, I put the phone in my pocket, forgetting about the notification. Once I was at the car, I can see it was a notification from Snapchat. It's a friend request. Cool. I figured it was one of the students I met earlier, and now they added me. So I added them without further investigation. Fast forward to later that night, and the person I added sends me a couple of messages. Okay, whatever. Let's see what they were about.
Hey, I was wondering if I could get to know you better. Maybe we can go out sometime? You seem really nice.
I ignored the advances, saying I didn't have time. But then, it got creepier. I called the guy out on the next day, but here's the thing. He hadn't added me on Snapchat. He insisted he forgot my Snapchat name, since he never wrote it down. He even proved it, and sure enough, the usernames didn't match. Well, that was creepy. Not sure who it was, but that should have been my sign to block and delete this random, but I never did. Later that night, I get another message from this person. So I open it, and it describes how I had my hair up that day, even the clothes I had. That's when I figured it could have been someone from my class that overheard me giving out my Snapchat. The thing is, there are easily over 100 people in this classroom. Not everybody sits in the same spot. The person who overheard it could have easily moved to the completely opposite side, and I would have had no idea of knowing who it could have been. Well, I make the smart decision, and I finally blocked the username. But a few days later, I get a request on Instagram. Great. This time it's a profile that has a bunch of anime characters. I don't know much about it other than I used to watch Sailor Moon and Pokemon, but I surely didn't know anyone who was into that. Regardless, this account begins to send me messages, saying things how I was such a bad person for blocking them. Now they wanted me to give them a chance. Well, how could I if I didn't even know who this stranger was? Why was it that they were so insistent in messaging me and not at least having the common decency to talk to me in person? I tell them,
I don't know who you are, and I'm going to block you again unless you tell me what it is you want with me. I'm tired of this. It's starting to creep me out.
I'm sorry. I'm just really shy. But I know who you are. I've been watching you in class. Okay, fine. I'll say hello to you tomorrow.
that never does happen. However, what takes place later that night in my dorm was creepy. My friend and I were asleep in our separate rooms, and that's when she texts me.
Hey, what are you doing in the kitchen? Can you keep it down?
I texted her back right away saying I was in my room. The thing is, before I could even go and check it out, my bedroom doors opened. Standing in the doorway was this 20-something-year-old male student. Here's the deal. He looked really familiar. It's like I'd seen him in one of my classes. Hold on. There was no way. Could this have been the person sending me messages? Things just got scary. Now, obviously scared someone broke in. I grab the hair straightener and I say in the most intimidating voice that I can, "Get out of here before I call the police."
Just give me a chance. Please. Shh. Don't tell anyone. I love you.
Was this person crazy? He just broke in, and he's expecting me to welcome him with open arms? And he loves me? Excuse me? Again, I'm demanding he leave, and thankfully he has the common decency in doing so when my friend comes charging at him with an ice pick. All this noise manages to wake up fellow students, and we're able to get a good description. But sadly, by the time we called campus security, he was gone. And just like that, we never saw him. He never showed up to class again, and I never did receive any suspicious messages. Maybe he got the hint, or maybe he's just waiting. I don't know, but it's been almost a year, and nothing. Story number 7. Creepy music teacher. When I was 15 years old, I attended a small private school in northern Wales. My parents were all about me getting the best education possible, which explained why I'd started studying here a year ago. By the way, this was in late 2007, and I'm female. I remember always looking forward to this music class we had every week. It wasn't so much a class, but this guy in his early 30s, I forget his name, would come to our campus and teach us about music. I think he had a contract with the school, therefore he would show up. He would bring his guitar and other instruments, and we would sing along with him. Now, I did mention I forgot his name, so in this story we will just call him Stu. Well, one day, Stu ended up having to take a family leave due to having to help his grandfather go through some hard times. Therefore, someone needed to take his spot. Now, I don't know if this school was lazy with checking who they were hiring or what was going on, but we ended up getting this new guy that seemed off. That's the best way to describe him. We will call this new guy Leo. He was much older than Stu. Leo appeared to be in his late 40s. Now, all seemed fine the first few times my fellow students and I met up with him, but then I started to notice some things. At first, it started with a few snarky comments. Then, it escalated to him calling me his one and only princess. It seemed weird, but since he was pretty nice to everyone, albeit a bit awkward, I tried not to mind it as much, though I did find it weird he would only do this with me. In fact, he would go out of his way to talk to me. There was one day I was hanging out with some of my friends after school, and we were at a coffee shop. That's when he happened to run into him. As soon as he saw me, he goes for a hug, and he keeps it for longer than you should expect to hug someone. It was really weird, and my friends were just looking at me like, "You can let go of her now." He did that, and after about 15 seconds, he says something like,
"There's my precious princess. So good to see you. I haven't seen you at the music session lately. I hope you're okay."
See, I didn't mention this, but I chose to skip the days I knew we had that meetup because I was starting to feel uncomfortable. Anyways, after a few awkward minutes of talking, we started to walk away from him. That's when he has the nerve to say,
"Wait, come back. I just need to say something. It's about the class. It won't take more than 10 seconds.
Reluctantly, I go back to him, and he hands me what appears to be a business card. Really, all it was a note that had his number and a message that said, "Call me sometime if you ever need anything." I pretty much threw it away. Now fast forward a couple of weeks, and our old music instructor, Stu, was back. I hadn't seen or heard from Leo in some time, and I finally figured that ordeal was over. However, I had no idea of knowing that things were about to get even scarier. One afternoon, I'd stayed late on campus to work with one of my teachers. I was having a hard time with math, so she was able to help me out. Well, it's the end of November, so naturally it's already dark by 5 p.m., meaning I had to wait for my dad to pick me up at 6 p.m. in the dark. So I'm there in the parking lot listening to my iPod, and that's when I hear somebody call out to me. So I turn around, and it's my worst fear. It's Leo.
"Hey, what are you doing out here on your own? Do you need someone to keep you company?"
I almost considered running back to the classroom, but I was tired of this guy's nonsense. I stood up to him, and I told him to leave me alone. However, this only seems to anger him, and what happens next is him grabbing my arm and then saying,
"You're coming with me, and we're going somewhere where nobody is going to hear you."
The panic that ensued was something I would never forget, and this guy was strong. I feared this was how it was going to end, but just when all hope seemed lost, my hero shows up. I hear another familiar voice. This time, it's Stu, and he's putting some of his instruments in the back of his van. Well, Leo lets go of my arm and takes off running into the darkness, and I pretty much run up to Stu, and I'm crying in his arms while I describe what just took place moments ago. Needless to say, we go to the principal's office and officers are called. I later find this information out. After a few hours from us reporting Leo, they find him at his apartment. he started acting suspiciously, and so officers were eventually able to get permission to enter his apartment. Not only was his apartment a mess, but they found a USB drive that contained photos of my school, students, and worst of all, me. Most of the photos of myself appear to be taken in secret, almost as if taken from a distance. Well, he was taken in, and that was pretty much the last time I heard from Leo. Story number 8. He was hiding in my dorm room. This isn't super scary in the traditional sense, but it does remind you on how anything can happen. I'll take you back to about 6 months prior. It was myself and a couple of my college friends. We were studying at the library. We had been there for the majority of the evening, and we had finished with our studies around 10 p.m. From here, we ended up going to Denny's to get a quick meal. Fast forward an hour later, and we are returning back to campus to head to our dorms. But right away, something seemed fishy. First and foremost, the plant we kept outside was tipped over. Now, it wasn't really a heavy vase, and it had fallen in the past, so we assumed the wind had knocked it over, and we stepped inside without much thought. Oh yeah, and before I forget to mention, it's just myself and 2 other roommates. We're female, by the way. Moving on. Once we stepped in, everything seemed pretty normal, albeit my bedroom door was open. I normally kept it closed, just as a force of habit, so I did find it sort of weird that it was like that. I blamed it on my forgetfulness, and I head in as my other roommates soon go to their rooms. Fast forward about 15 minutes later, I'm stepping out of the shower and changing into my pajamas. But just then, I ended up hearing what sounded like movement. This should have been my first sign something was wrong, but I'm tired, and I live with 2 other roommates, so I tell myself that was the source of the noise. So I head to bed, and naturally I go to sleep. Fast forward about an hour, and that's when I feel movement. What I saw laying next to me was one of the spookiest sights ever. There is what appears to be some homeless dude, and he's just staring into my eyes as if I was his wife. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and I run out of the room. This wakes up my friends, and they're stepping out confused. Mind you, this homeless man has yet to exit my room. So what do? We go and grab something we could to use to defend ourselves, and then we kick the door down. The man is long gone, and the only signs of him being there is the window being wide open. So we ended up calling campus security, and they checked the surrounding area. He isn't found, but one student did say that they saw somebody suspicious looking into some of the dorm rooms about an hour before we had arrived. Since it was dark, he assumed it was another student. Things started to make sense, but even so, we ended up doing a couple of things. We checked for the spare key that we kept in the planter, and it was missing. Also, we found empty food wrappers and a soda can inside my closet. We never did get the spare key back, but we did have the locks changed. It's now been almost 6 months, and we haven't seen him again. Story number 9. A Library Creepiness. I want to preface my story by saying that I was in the 12th grade. This was back in the mid-2000s, and during the time, the teachers I had started making us write our essays and doing assignments on the computer. This was a whole new thing for me, seeing as I mainly grew up as a kid writing papers out. Still, it was cool to be able to learn how to use a computer. The only problem was my family hadn't purchased a computer. This meant that I oftentimes had to stay after school or go to the on-campus library. That's where this incident is going to happen. Now, at the time, our campus allowed family members and friends of students to use the library. It was never an issue, and oftentimes I would see the moms and dads of my friends. I remember one time, my friend Allie's mom had brought me some cookies, but I'm not here to talk about how delicious those were. So, it was a Friday night, and I was working on a paper for my English class. There are a couple of students here and there, and there's some parents that were reading at some of the tables. At one point, I needed to get up to pick out a book that was on the second floor. I never really like going on the second floor, seeing as that's the silent floor. At least the one on the bottom can let you talk to friends. So I get up and I head up there and I began looking for my book. As I started to make my way down a poorly lit aisle of books, a man turns the corner up in front of me. He looks to be in his early 30s, with dirty long brown hair and ripped up shirt and jeans. Now, I wouldn't have minded him too much if it wasn't for what was about to happen.
Hello there. Do you need some help finding a book?
No, I already know where it is. Thank you.
No, come on, come closer. Let me help you.
Mind you, I'd never seen this person before, and he surely didn't look like a librarian. He kept on going about how this was his first day as a librarian. I passed by him, but then he begins to follow me.
By the way, my name's Donnie. What's yours?
I tried not to be rude, so I just gave him a random name. Oh, my name is Bree. It's nice to meet you.
That's a nice name. By the way, how old are you?
I'm 18. Why does it matter? I'm starting to feel a bit awkward as the creepy face he has suddenly showed me that he was after more than just helping me out.
Really? You look like you could be 24. Are you sure you aren't messing with me?
I ignore him, grab my book, and begin walking back the way I came. However, before I could get far, he grabs my arm and he pulls me closer.
Wait, let me give you my number. Call me sometime, will you? If you need help studying, I'm your man.
The dude has a tight grasp, and he's not letting go. Now, I'm pretty much yelling at this point, but it seemed the second story was empty. After about 10 seconds, he had the decency to let go, and I take off running. Now, once I'm downstairs, I head to the front desk and I tell them about the creep. The librarian and a teacher head up there, only to find the place empty. And from the looks of it, he had taken the second story exit and was the reason as to why he wasn't found. In the end, I ripped up the note he gave me with his number on it, and I myself would never see or hear from him ever again. Not the scariest story in the world, and maybe he was just a little too forward, but at the time, I wasn't sure what his intentions were. Now let's end today's video with our last story, followed back to my dorm. So back in college, like 2 years ago, I used to be a pretty shy person. I still am, but I guess you could describe me as someone who would rather be a lone wolf. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have friends, but I just prefer doing things my way. Anyways, I was this student who took 6 classes every semester. I pretty much had no time to do anything with anyone. I think my roommates felt bad, but I assured them it was fine as I wanted to be out of college in 3 years. Well, one evening I decided I would join my roommates as they were throwing a party for the Circle K Club. The on-campus party was big, and they ended up using the Performing Arts building. They had food, drinks, music, you name it. Now, as I'm not the sort of person to go to parties, it was a bit awkward, so I mainly sat at a table while browsing on my phone. And try as my friends did, they couldn't get me to dance with them. So, as I sat there minding my own business, another student ended up sitting a couple of seats next to me. He introduces himself as Eric, and we have a pretty normal conversation. He was 25 years old, clean cut with glasses. Now, after some talk, he wants to know if I wanted to dance with him, and I decided I would be brave and said yes. So the next 10 or so minutes we dance, and I'm finally starting to feel a bit more comfortable. Once we were done, he heads over to get his drinking game on. I wasn't someone that was into that, so I returned back to my table. Now let's fast forward about an hour. That's when things would get creepy. I hadn't seen Eric anymore, and I figured now that it was 11 p.m., it was a good time to head back to my dorm room. I bid my friends a good night, and I started to make the 10-minute walk back to the university dorms.
Hey, Emma, hold on a second. Wait for me.
I turn around, and it's Eric, and by the way he was talking and stumbling, It was obvious he had way too many drinks.
Where are you going, beautiful? Want to go back to my dorm room? We can have so much fun.
He then proceeds to grab my arm and he pulls me closer. I pull back, but this causes him to get angry.
Why you gotta be like that? I saw the way you were looking at me in the dance hall. I know you're mad in love with me.
Okay, this guy was crazy, and now I was starting to get a bit scared. I start walking faster, but he ends up following me for the next couple of minutes. Sadly, my phone wasn't charged, and it pretty much ripped a few minutes after I left. That was one of the reasons I was out there on my own. Well, once I'm close to the dorms, I don't see him anymore. Whatever, he probably passed out somewhere. I felt bad, but at the same time, I was angry he acted that way. Now fast forward about 20 minutes, and I realized our trash bin in the kitchen was full. I figured, let me just go empty it right now. This is when something crazy would occur. For whatever reason, I get the urge to look through the peephole. I guess I was still nervous over Eric. I'm glad I do, because there he is, pacing back and forth. At one point, he even starts knocking on my door like crazy. No way this was happening. Eric, I know that's you outside. You need to leave. Otherwise, I'm calling the campus police.
What are they gonna do about it? They don't have anything on me.
He then began throwing himself against the door, presumably trying to break it down. So I head to the kitchen where my phone was charging, and soon I'm on the line with campus police. They arrive 5 minutes later, and Eric is now attempting to break into someone else's dorm room. Well, they have a good talk with him, and like I already knew, he was obviously not all there.